After more than a year away, I'm back on the Camino. Early morning at Manchester Airport, and I'm waiting for my Ryanair flight to Bilbao via Barcelona. The last time I was at Burgos Cathedral was in September 2019, and in very pleasant weather conditions I'm ready to start walking. If you've seen the movie The Way, this might be a familiar scene, as it's the path that the four main protagonists walked along to leave town after Tom, Martin Sheen's character, had his rucksack stolen and later returned. And this is the gate where they left town, escorted by a gypsy family. The stretch of the Camino between Burgos and Leon is known as the Meseta, which translates as plateau or plains in English, and this was my first taste of the barren land that lay ahead of me over the next 8 days. A rare water fountain on this stage of the Camino, though a cold beer is much more preferable. The end of day one on the road at Hornillos del Camino. And some liquid refreshment after a tough last 6 kilometers that reminded me of how long I'd been away from the trail. In Hontanas, I stopped for breakfast. And visited the Iglesia de Nuestra Señora de la Inmaculada Concepción, where I bought a patriarchal cross. The Meseta continues its relentless path across to Castilla y León. Next stop was Castro Jerez, a lovely town with good accommodation. And stunning views. An early start with long shadows and preparing for a tough climb to begin the day. This stage turned out to be quite a challenge, with kilometre upon kilometre of featureless landscape, devoid of people, vehicles, and even animals, except masses of flies. The only way to keep going was by simply keeping your head down and putting one foot in front of the other, as the sun beat down without respite. And contrary to the song from the musical My Fair Lady, the rain in Spain does not fall on the plains. The Hotel Rural in Boadilla del Camino was a welcome relief, and I met quite a few fellow pilgrims in the restaurant who were taking a breather before the final 5 kilometers to Fromista. A bottle of chilled lemonade and a couple of beers helped to replace vital fluids. And after the rigours of that part of the Meseta, the Canal de Castilla was a godsend. The trees on the towpath offered shelter from the heat, and just the sight of the water helped to cool you down. Fromista was another charming town on the Camino. But after an enjoyable evening with my Camino companions, the Meseta returns with a vengeance. Though the weather was a bit cooler on this September day, Carrion de los Condes was quite an experience, as I stayed in a convent called Santa Clara, where guests were accommodated in small cell-like rooms that were not unlike prison cells. Not that I've ever had first-hand experience of spending a night in one. After a really nice day's walking from Carrion de los Condes, with Camino friends left to right, Davide from Colombia, Christina from Washington DC and Abby from the UK, we stopped at this cafe in Calzadilla del Creza. Albergues with swimming pools are always a bonus, and this was a great relief for my feet after 5 days of hiking. Sahagún was another highlight of this stage of the Camino, and the hostel La Bastide du Chemin was a taste of relative luxury after nights in dormitory bunks. I was told by the owner of the hotel that Sahagún is famous for its leeks, and this combination with tuna and tomatoes was a tasty and refreshing summer dish. Many years ago, hopscotch grids chalked on a street were a common sight in the UK, so it was quite nostalgic to see that it's still a popular game among Spanish children. Reliegos is a very small stop on the Camino, but I had heard about a bar in the village named after Elvis Presley, and here it is. It was a unique pub that I had to visit, though its lack of draft beer was a slight disappointment. Nevertheless, an unforgettable place. My first sight of Leon, with the spires of its famous cathedral just about visible in the distance. And here I am, in front of Leon's most famous building. And looking forward to a rest day in the city. One of the nice aspects of walking the Camino is that you can bump into fellow pilgrims that you've met on the way. So when I spotted Jennifer and Frank from Jackson, Mississippi, I asked them to take this photograph. Serrano ham is popular all over Spain, but in this part of Castilla y León, it's known as cecina. The locals love the stuff, and so do I. The Kingdom of Leon stretched as far as Galicia, Asturias, and most of what is now known as Portugal, and ruled the region from 909 to 1230. There were monuments around the city honouring the monarchs who sat on the throne, so I had to have a selfie with one of the kings of Leon. This is an empanada de Leon pastry, a mixture of cheese and cecina, the local ham I mentioned earlier, and it makes for a delicious snack. Apparently the Holy Grail was found in Leon, though its authenticity is open to question. Unfortunately, the museum where it's housed was closed when I was there, so I bought a postcard instead. All pilgrims will know how this gentleman feels. After a bit of a slog on a path next to a busy road full of trucks and delivery vans, San Martin del Camino didn't appear to offer much for the weary traveller. There were a few beers with Dries from Ghent, Belgium, and Raymond from Bielefeld, Germany, in our hostel made for a very pleasant evening. Approaching the Puente de Orbigo, a lovely old 13th century bridge with about 20 arches that takes you into the village of Hospital de Orbigo. The Crucero de Santo Toribio was one of the features of this stage. By the way, the previous photo was taken by Christina from DC, who you can see scooting ahead in this picture. My accommodation in Astorga was a spa hotel, which was a relaxing change from a bunk in an albergue. Between Astorga and Ponferrada, I stopped at a roadside cafe by the name of Bar Restaurant Chris in Murias de Rechiraldo for bacon, eggs and sausages, a breakfast that the Spanish do very well, though they insist on using Wiener sausages instead of Spanish bangers, which are far superior, and they don't seem too keen on ketchup or brown sauce either. A stop at Maison Cowboy in El Ganso provided a notable stamp on my credencial. The bar was one of those that I'd read about on Camino websites, and it was worth a break to refuel with a tortilla and tinto de verano. Dries had some issues with stones in his boots on this rocky trail. Rabanal del Camino was a particularly nice village on the way to Ponferrada, and Dries had already made arrangements to stay in the best hotel in the village. I can't say I wasn't a little envious, but there was another 6 kilometres to go for me. Some pilgrims do the Camino accompanied by a donkey, and this was the second one I'd seen since Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. At just over 1,500 metres, the Cruz de Ferro is the highest point of the Camino Frances. Many pilgrims place a small memorial stone at the foot of the cross, usually brought with them from home and often inscribed with the name of a relative or loved one that they wish to remember. I was no exception to this tradition, and for me, this day was probably the most important one of my Camino. It was fitting that the token I had prepared to lay at the base of the Cruz de Ferro, a painted stone for my late wife Junco, was being added on 10th September, a date that was particularly resonant for me, as it was 18 years and 1 day since she passed away. The descent from the Cruz de Ferro was tough, as expected, and it would be no exaggeration to say that it was the most difficult I had encountered on the Camino up to that point. A lot of the time the terrain was full of boulders, like a dry riverbed. Other times the sedimentary rock formations created what, if my memory of school geography lessons is correct, are known as scree slopes. Every step was an ordeal, and it seemed to go on forever. Spectacular views though. My usual stop for tortilla and café con leche was particularly welcome today. When I arrived at Ponferrada, this marked the end of my Camino for now. The Albergue Guiana was one of the best hostels I've stayed at on the Camino, and no early curfew either. A stroll around the market in Ponferrada before catching my train to Barcelona. And as the train to Barcelona arrives to take me away from northwest Spain, I only have 95 kilometers to walk before I finish my Camino Francés. Back next year to complete my pilgrimage. Some of the stamps I collected on the 285 kilometer stretch of the Camino from Burgos to Ponferrada. I hope you enjoyed my photo story, and thank you for watching.